Paul McCartney had spent years in the post-Beatles shadow, his solo work greeted with polite nods rather than thunder. When Band on the Run exploded into the world, it rewrote what success could look like for him beyond the greatest band of all time. The song did more than hit it declared independence. It resonated with freedom and reinvention in every note, built on a foundation of adversity and rebirth. Wings had escaped the ghost of the Fab Four, and this song proved that Paul McCartney could stand tall and alone. In the years after the Beatles split, Paul McCartney found himself in a strange limbo. His name still carried the weight of history, yet every new release was judged through the lens of what came before. Early solo work and Wings projects had success, but critics often dismissed them as lightweight compared to his Beatles output. The shadow was long, and stepping out from it required more than just good songs. The desire to prove himself burned quietly but persistently. McCartney was not simply chasing sales, he wanted to demonstrate that his creative force remained intact. He knew that to convince the world, he would need a record that could stand on its own, free of nostalgia. The project that became Band on the Run would be his chance. By this point, Wings had already undergone significant lineup changes. Band members had come and gone, leaving McCartney to rebuild the group's identity multiple times. The instability made every new venture a risk, but it also gave him the freedom to shape the band around his vision. He was determined that this album would mark a turning point. There was also a hunger for reinvention. Paul had been painted as the pop Beatle, the one leaning toward melodies rather than experimentation. With Band on the Run, he aimed to blend accessibility with ambition, proving he could craft music that was both popular and substantial. The concept began to take form as a thematic journey. The title track's concept of escape mirrored his own ambitions. The imagery of breaking free resonated deeply with where he stood in his career. It wasn't just a song idea, it was a personal statement wrapped in melody. That thematic link gave the project its core energy. The early writing sessions revealed a clarity he hadn't felt in years. Ideas flowed quickly, and the pieces of the song began to align with his vision of liberation. The creative momentum gave him confidence that he was on the right path. For the first time in a long while, the music felt bigger than the baggage. By the time the decision to record abroad was made, the project had already gained a sense of purpose. It would be a gamble, one that meant leaving behind familiar studios and routines. But for McCartney, escaping the shadow required more than new songs. It required a complete change of environment. That leap would lead him to Lagos. Choosing Lagos, Nigeria, as the recording location was anything but conventional. McCartney envisioned a fresh atmosphere that could spark creativity far from the pressures of London and the lingering weight of Beatles comparisons. However, the reality awaiting Wings was far from the romantic idea he imagined. Within days of arrival, 2 band members quit, leaving only Paul, Linda McCartney, and Denny Laine to carry the sessions. The sudden loss of personnel meant the workload tripled for those who remained. Instead of an expanded group effort, Band on the Run would largely rest on McCartney's shoulders. The recording facilities were basic compared to the polished studios he was used to. Air conditioning was unreliable, equipment was outdated, and the heat was unrelenting. It was a stark contrast to the resources he had during his Beatles years, forcing him to adapt quickly. The discomfort became part of the process. Despite the challenges, there was a raw energy in the sessions. Without the luxury of endless options, decisions had to be made fast, and instinct often guided the choices. This urgency infused the music with a sense of immediacy that polished studios sometimes dulled. The grit of Lagos began to seep into the recordings. Tensions weren't only in the studio. Lagos at the time had political unrest, and the cultural environment was vastly different from what the band had known. McCartney navigated both the artistic hurdles and the unfamiliar social landscape, determined to keep the project moving forward. The stripped-down lineup created unexpected opportunities. Without extra musicians to rely on, McCartney took on multiple roles: bass, guitar, drums, and vocals, reasserting his versatility. It was a return to the self-reliance he had shown on earlier solo work, now with a renewed determination. By the midpoint of the sessions, the hardships had begun to bind the remaining members together. Every obstacle overcome reinforced their commitment to finishing the album. The conditions were far from ideal, but they gave Band on the Run a character it could not have gained anywhere else. The next challenge, however, would strike without warning. The turning point came late one night when Paul and Linda McCartney were walking through Lagos. A group of armed men confronted them and stole their bags, which contained notebooks filled with song lyrics and cassette demos. Months of preparation vanished in an instant. It was a devastating blow to a project already balancing on the edge. With no backups available, McCartney faced a daunting choice: abandon or rebuild. He decided to start again from memory, piecing together the songs from fragments in his mind. The pressure was immense, but it also forced him to strip away anything unnecessary. The essentials rose to the surface. This setback became a crucible for creativity. The rewriting process injected a raw urgency into the material that could never have been planned. Each lyric and chord was etched deeper by the act of remembering. The songs gained a sharper focus and emotional weight. The loss also shifted the dynamic in the studio. What had been a structured recording plan turned into a process driven by instinct and collaboration between the remaining three members. Every take carried the knowledge that nothing about this album had come easy. That knowledge gave the performances extra grit. McCartney's resilience shone during these sessions. Rather than dwelling on what was gone, he funneled his energy into what could still be created. This mindset turned the theft from a fatal setback into a catalyst for reinvention. The adversity became part of the album's DNA. By the time the reworked versions began to take shape, the songs felt stronger than the originals. They carried the atmosphere of survival of art pulled from the brink. The theft had, paradoxically, given the music a deeper sense of purpose. When the sessions in Lagos wrapped, Band on the Run was no longer just an album in progress. It was a testament to perseverance, rebuilt note by note. That spirit would shine brightest in the track that would define the project. What's the most important thing you've ever had to rebuild from scratch? If I ever get out of here. Band on the Run was designed as more than a single. It was a journey in three movements. The opening was reflective, almost weary, painting the image of confinement. Gradually, it built into a triumphant release, embodying the sensation of breaking free. The song's structure mirrored the challenges McCartney had just faced. The concept took inspiration from a remark George Harrison once made during tense business meetings, likening the Beatles to prisoners breaking out. McCartney reimagined the sentiment into something universal, about escaping any force that holds you down. It became both personal and accessible to listeners everywhere. In the studio, the arrangement took shape layer by layer. McCartney played bass, guitar, drums, and sang lead vocals, crafting each section to feel like a chapter in a larger story. The transitions between tempos and moods gave the song a cinematic quality. It was bold for a commercial single. The lyrics carried a double edge, playful in delivery, but rooted in the idea of liberation. Lines about running and breaking away became metaphors for artistic independence. For McCartney, it was a declaration that he could thrive without the Beatles' shadow looming overhead. The recording itself reflected that spirit. There was no attempt to mimic his former band's sound. This was Wings, streamlined and confident. The track had its own identity, yet still carried McCartney's signature melodic touch. It sounded like a door swinging wide open. When the final mix was played back, the sense of arrival was undeniable. It was more than a completed track, it felt like a statement piece. The song encapsulated the entire journey from struggle to triumph. Its release would carry that energy to the world. By the time Band on the Run reached audiences, it didn't just entertain, it validated McCartney's post-Beatles career. Every note was a reminder that he was not running from something, but toward his own artistic freedom. That message would be amplified even further when the single began climbing the charts. When Band on the Run was released in late 1973, it began a steady climb that turned into a global takeover. By the following year, the single had reached #1 in the United States, Canada, and New Zealand, and #3 in the United Kingdom. It became Wings' most successful and enduring hit, cementing McCartney's relevance in the post-Beatles era. This was no modest success, it was a career-defining victory. Radio airplay was relentless. The song's unique three-part structure made it stand out from other hits of the time, ensuring listeners stayed hooked from start to finish. Audiences responded not just to its melody, but to the freedom embedded in its message. It was both musically ambitious and instantly memorable. Critical reception matched its commercial impact. Reviewers hailed it as McCartney's finest work since the Beatles, praising its ambition and craftsmanship. The success silenced many skeptics who had doubted his ability to deliver major hits without Lennon. The narrative of his career began to shift. The song's momentum lifted the Band on the Run album to similar heights. The album topped the charts in multiple countries and won the Grammy Award for Best Pop Vocal Performance by a duo, group, or chorus in 1975. Its sales and accolades further proved McCartney was capable of leading a project that resonated worldwide. Tours in support of the album drew massive crowds, showcasing McCartney as a performer in his own right. Audiences filled arenas to hear the new material, embracing Wings as more than just Paul's side project. The energy of those performances reinforced the idea that this success was not a fluke. The cultural impact was equally strong. Band on the Run became a shorthand for resilience, often referenced in articles and documentaries about McCartney's evolution. It shifted his image from ex-Beatle to established solo artist. The world was now listening on his terms. By the close of 1974, McCartney had not only achieved a commercial win, he had turned a personal battle into a public triumph. The song's success was proof that the post-Beatles chapter could stand proudly beside his past. The escape he had envisioned in the lyrics had, in a very real way, become his reality. The triumph of Band on the Run gave McCartney more than chart positions, it gave him a new foundation. He was no longer defined solely as a former Beatle. He had carved out an identity as a leader of Wings and a master of reinvention. The song's success allowed him to explore music with fewer comparisons to his past. It was artistic freedom earned through persistence. The album's critical and commercial reception set a new standard for what McCartney could achieve outside the Beatles. Where earlier solo projects were often labeled as lightweight, this was seen as ambitious, cohesive, and timeless. It showed he could blend experimentation with mass appeal. That combination became a hallmark of his next phase. Musically, Band on the Run embodied the balance McCartney sought. It had the melodic charm fans expected, but it also took risk with structure and arrangement. It proved he could innovate without losing accessibility. That confidence would define much of his work through the late 70s. The success also strengthened Wings' identity as a legitimate band. With Linda McCartney's harmonies and Denny Lainey's contributions, the project felt collaborative rather than a solo act in disguise. This sense of unity gave the group staying power. They were no longer seen as temporary. In the broader cultural landscape, McCartney's resurgence served as inspiration for other artists rebuilding after major changes. His ability to adapt and thrive demonstrated that endings could lead to stronger beginnings. It became a case study in how to survive artistic upheaval. Over time, Band on the Run remained a centerpiece of McCartney's live shows, its opening chords sparking instant recognition. Each performance carried the weight of its history and the joy of its triumph. It was more than a song, it was his proof of self-reliance. By reclaiming his narrative, Paul McCartney ensured that his legacy was not frozen in the past. Band on the Run became the defining anthem of his independence, a reminder that the journey after a breakup can lead to new heights. In breaking free musically, he secured his place as one of rock's most enduring forces. Band on the Run was more than a chart-topping hit, it was a turning point that redefined Paul McCartney's place in music history. Born from adversity in a distant studio and rebuilt from memory after devastating loss, it became a bold statement of freedom and resilience. The song silenced doubts and proved he could thrive beyond the shadow of the Beatles. Its layered story of escape still resonates decades later, reminding us that reinvention is not just possible, it can lead to an artist's greatest work. If you love true stories where music becomes both a declaration and a turning point, hit subscribe and keep exploring the soundtracks that changed everything.